even though you have Brexit and all that, and you might have your own opinions so if Brexit is something of a positive force or a negative force in today's globalized world. But from Britain, we have a union activist who has worked closely with some of the British unions, and as someone else was talking about a little earlier, it is of utmost importance that the unions are on board if you're going to have a basic income debate which is informed and which has the possibility of maybe winning the day in some years' time. So we are very fortunate that at last, with some delays, Becca Kirkpatrick has been able to make it over here to Oslo, and she's then going to give us an insight into her work with some of the British unions. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, hi, and thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm sorry to only be able to present to you in English today. I have been trying to learn a very few words of Norwegian. So, first of all, who am I? I am a member of Unison, where I'm also a branch chair, a member of Unite as well, so two different unions. I work as a community organiser and also teach fitness. And for 10 years before that, I worked in the UK Health Service, where I was also a union activist. And today I'm going to share with you what we've been doing in the UK, quite a few of us, to grow the debate about basic income in the unions. And I'm going to start with my own reasons for support. Number one is my day job. So we work with and support a lot of people who have issues ranging from mental health, low pay, poverty in other forms and the effects of that, cost of living, and also benefit sanctions, welfare sanctions. I'm going to mention that a few times. What that means is where you're on social support, and if you don't comply with the conditions, they can take it away completely. So that's happening a lot now in the UK. My number two reasons are a bit closer to home. So this in the picture there on the right is my little sister Vez. Vez was also a union activist, as you can see there. But in 2013, she had a really serious brain injury, which is going to affect her forever. So I'm now part-time carer for Vez as well, and that's going to increase in the future. And also, this is my husband Daz. He works as a tarmacker in the daytime, and in the evenings he volunteers as a boxing coach, which he doesn't get paid for. It's pretty exhausting. He would rather not have to do both of those things. And his boss has made him register as self-employed. He's not actually self-employed, but it just means that the boss doesn't have to pay him any sick pay, any holiday pay, or any pension, which again is becoming increasingly common. And flexibility is always on the employer's terms and not the worker's terms. So I'll just show you a quick graph. This is the situation in the UK, the number of people who are now on contracts now that don't guarantee them any number of set hours in a week. So they literally have no idea how much money they're going to get from week to week in their job. So I first heard about basic income when the Swiss referendum, in the run-up to the Swiss referendum. And I liked the idea straight away, and I took a motion to my branch and we discussed it, and the branch liked it as well. So we backed it from that point. And we started trying to get our region of Unison. So we're in Birmingham, so the West Midlands region, to be interested. And Barb Jacobson, who some of you know from UBI Europe, she came to speak to our region and went down very well. And our branch put in a motion to the Unison National Conference for the first time. And then as well as that, we decided we wanted to start listening to the community. So we began running listening stalls all around the region. I'm just going to flick through a few pictures. We were asking people, first of all, sharing the idea, see what they think, see what would it mean for them if they had a basic income. And we heard three really big themes cropping up time and time again. First was going back to or starting education. The second was having more time with family, starting a family, better time with family, and the third was actually giving back to the community. So those were the kind of things that people were telling us. And that's what the stalls look like. That's my colleague Gavin, who's also a Unison activist next to me. And every stall we did, we also did this very not scientific ball poll. And everywhere we went, we found the support was actually overwhelming. I mean, clearly it's not scientific in any way, but we expected to get a lot more pushback than we did. So that result surprised us, and every picture we took of the ball poll looked the same. But we do want to test it further by going to more areas, going to more hostile areas. We don't just want to do a few and think, oh, that proves our point. You know, we want to really test it. So this is a group of us locally. We all live nearby, and we went to see our MP. That's our MP on the left there, Steve McCabe. He'd actually heard about basic income, and he was very keen to meet us, which is an unusual feeling. So in that picture, we've got a student, a former welfare benefit advisor. I was there as a part-time carer, a single parent, so we all had different reasons for supporting, and we shared those with him. What we've got here now is a picture of the Unison Conference 2015, and just to explain to you all, we're at the conference every year, there's many, many motions which are all jostling in competition to actually get heard in the time available. So that first year, we ran out of time for the basic income motion to be heard, unfortunately. So this picture is me talking about basic income in relation to a different motion, which was about human rights. So I wanted to make sure at least it would still get discussed that year. So going then into 2016, and the first big union in the UK, which is GMB, it's a general union, so all different kinds of workers can join the GMB. They actually did pass a motion at their conference to support basic income. And this cartoon I've put in is an old cartoon by the IWW. Has anyone heard of the IWW? One, okay. It's a very old union, originated in the States. You should look them up. The person who moved the motion at GMB conference was also a member of IWW. And they historically were always saying, instead of just a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, we should abolish the wage system altogether. So they were quite a transformational union. So I thought that picture was quite appropriate for that moment in history. And then this picture shows a woman called Aisling Gallagher, and she's a member of Unite. When I get back from here, I'm going to be linking up with Aisling. She successfully moved a motion also at the Unite conference, the national conference, to support basic income. And that's a really big deal because they're pretty much the biggest union in the UK. And on that day when I heard the news, because I'm a member of Unite myself, I'd actually put in a motion several months before this at our local regional committee, and then it had gone out of my hands and worked its way up to conference, and by the end it was nothing to do with me. But when I heard the news, I was actually dancing around in my flat in my underwear, and my husband has that video, because it was very, very, very good news, a very big day for us to know that Unite and GMB at this point were both supporting basic income. And then finally, Unite and most of the UK unions are part of something called the TUC. It's an umbrella, it's like a federation. You probably have something here that's similar for your trade unions. And so Unite took a motion to the TUC Congress that year, and you can see the wording here. So it was acknowledging basic income and the good elements of what a basic income system would include. And so again, this is excellent to have this, at least in words. What it does need is for the affiliate unions that are part of the TUC to now build up a head of steam and some pressure to actually turn it into action. So Unison Conference, my main union, 2016, we tried again. We put the motion in again for the second time. Unfortunately, we had a very similar outcome. We really tried our best leafleting people at the conference, please prioritise our motion. Didn't quite make it. Never mind, we learnt from that experience. We still were doing more listening at union events the whole time, so this was us again at another Unison sports event, asking people what they thought, and you can see the result. This was a picture from something again happened in Birmingham. It was a conference about the Lucas Plan, so again something very interesting for you guys to look up. These people were reps at the time of the old Lucas factory, which used to make weapons. And they came up with a plan back in the 70s to convert that into socially useful things that they could produce using the same factory. And so we went along to raise the issue of basic income because we felt it was relevant in terms of helping us transition out of industries that we might not want to keep going in the same way that they currently are. Whereas at the moment, often you find unions are forced into defending those kind of industries because people's livelihoods are based on them. So back in Birmingham, in the West Midlands, 2017, we had an election for a regional mayor. And we, again, Unison wanted to get basic income into the debate. And we did pretty well, actually, because Unison was calling for the future mayor to test basic income. And this picture is from page 2 of the biggest business paper in Birmingham. So that was a pretty big deal for us, getting that big headline right there on the second page. That's Ravi Subramanian there in the picture. He's our regional secretary, who's been really supportive. And to our delight, we actually found that the Labour candidate for the mayor, who was one of the 2 front runners, did put it into his manifesto that if he was elected mayor, he was going to test basic income. As well as that, the Green candidate was talking about it a lot. It was also in his manifesto, although he wasn't likely to win. And this was ahead of the Assembly. So Unison is part of an alliance called Citizens UK. It's a charity, and it had an assembly for the 2 leading candidates for the mayor. And again was asking them, would they test basic income? So Chantella, who's a nursery manager and part of my Unison branch, was there, sharing her story of how she hadn't been paid her wages at Christmas, she wasn't entitled to any welfare support, and how basic income would really have made a difference. There was 1,000 people in the audience, and so they got to hear the 2 top candidates give their answer on basic income, and as we know, one of them said that he would test it if he was elected. In fact, we did ask all the candidates. As you can see, 3 said they would do a pilot out of the 5. And the further one was kind of iffy. And then the Conservative candidate, he still said that he was fascinated, which we put down as quite an interesting result as well. So again, just before that election outcome, we had a hearing by the Work and Pensions Committee, which is a subcommittee of the UK government. And they invited some different experts who are pro and anti-basic income to give them some oral evidence. And I was there to represent Unison. Unfortunately, this committee, when they put their report out in the end, they basically told the government to pay no attention to this idea. We weren't very surprised by that, and of course it's early days, but that's how that ended up. Still ahead of that mayor election, Unison was trying to get more public awareness of basic income. So we had this little street action. We were asking people to fill in these blank checks for the future mayor, telling the mayor what you would do with basic income. We had some family activities there, for example, gardening. You've also got me there. I'm doing some boxing with Daz, my husband, because that's what we would do more of with basic income. And yeah, and then the day that the result was announced of the election, we had this fundraiser planned. Ravi Subramanian, who's the Unison Regional Secretary, he's also a DJ, so he agreed to DJ for us, but it was a bit of a commiseration rather than a celebration, because the Conservative won the mayor position, and obviously the Labour guy was the one who said that he would test basic income. So we were that close to having a West Midlands basic income test. You may have heard that also the Labour Party has pulled together a working group to look at basic income, and myself and other trade unionists have been part of that, and there was a bit of a pause. We had a general election, but we're hoping to get that going again. We also in the UK every year have a day of action against sanctions. So if you remember what I said near the start, sanctions is where your social support, your welfare could be taken away completely, if you're 5 minutes late for your appointment with your benefits support worker, or for any reason basically. Even if you have a job interview and miss your appointment, then they can take your benefits away. So every year there's a day of action, and we had an amazing debate here. So the guy on the right is Martin Johns from PCS, which is the union that benefit workers are actually part of. And it was a really fantastic night. So the room was packed, and it was just so vibrant. Everyone had loads of ideas and comments, and it was brilliant. I would love to see meetings like that happening all around the country. So this brings us up to 2017 National Conference for Unison. This time again we had another motion in. We had this time a fringe meeting to talk about basic income as well with the people at the conference. You can see here we had a special leaflet trying to get support to move the motion up the agenda. And unfortunately, this year we still failed again for the third time. We are going to try again next year, and we've got ideas of what we can do, learning from the failure, make sure that we get some airtime next year. So what else is coming up? So GMB, that first union that I mentioned, they may be holding a conference for the different unions that do support UBI to talk with each other. There's also a think tank called the RSA, which is pulling together a meeting, and they are inviting unions to that. So I wanted to quickly mention unions elsewhere. You'll probably be aware that in the Indian and Namibian pilots, the unions were really instrumental there. In Bulgaria, the trade unions were really instrumental in collecting so many signatures for the European Citizens Initiative. You might have heard in Finland that the unions have actually spoken out in opposition to basic income. And from what I understand over in the UK, I've read that it's due to the fact that they're kind of implicated in the current system, perhaps. The SEIU in America, I mean, quite famously, their former president, Andy Stern, has spoken and written on basic income, but also current branches of SEIU are part of the new economic security project over there. So when I finish, I would love to hear from you if you have any information for me about what unions in Norway are saying and thinking about basic income. You'll notice I've not really even mentioned automation at this point. It is getting a lot of headlines, journalists very excited about this, rising up the agenda. And because, obviously, of the current system, it means that we're not able to, well, if a machine is able to do a job that we used to do, it's something that we have to fear instead of possibly welcome. And there's a lot of talk about what types of work are most likely to be at risk of automation. But another way of looking at it is actually where is this most likely to impact? So I don't know if you can read that pretty well. Yeah, as you can see, this is a global issue, and most impact is going to fall quite heavily on the south of the world. The global union UNI is quite aware of this, and they have a whole strand of work on the future world of work. They're also trying to get unions in different countries to organise Amazon, which you'll be aware is quite at the front line of automation. So in the UK, the most powerful union is called the RMT, and they control the transport networks. So when they take action, they tend to win a lot of things, and transport is also at the very front line of automation. So what I think really needs to happen in the UK, I really think we should be getting strongly engaged with the RMT in the debate. Barb Jacobson has had one very good debate with Alex Gordon from the RMT, but I would love to see more of that happening. Wanted to quickly mention as well the idea of a shorter work week as a demand. So this is something that has been off the agenda for unions in the UK for a long time. Historically, unions always organised and demanded less working hours. And it's coming up the agenda once again. There's a lot of talk about how it could help the environment, as well as people's mental health, perhaps help the economy. There's a new think tank in the UK called Autonomy, and they are again trying to stimulate discussion of a shorter work week. But really, this is a nice updated version that my friend made of the old demand for 8 hours that you might be familiar with: 8 hours labour, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest, and he thought it could change that around to probably 3, 12 and 9 by this point if we had things sorted out a bit better. Very quickly, wanted to show you this sculpture which is displayed at the People's History Museum in Manchester, and it's the hand of a clock turning round and then hanging off the hand and trying to kind of hold on to it but also slow it down, and failing in the effort is 2 workers, also a child labourer and a slave. So that's quite clearly showing what an impact the question of time has on workers' lives and who gets to control our time. And finally, I think this is a really, really precious debate for us to be talking about the types of jobs that we actually do need. And I think the idea of basic income will help us to speak about that in a union context and just put forward different proposals of how we organise meeting everyone's needs. So, just finally then, these are the 3 big questions that I see us needing to discuss as trade unions, and the kind of things that I want unions at their conferences and their working groups to be thinking about. So obviously there's many different varying types of a basic income, and we may support one more than another version. So from a worker's viewpoint, what would be the ideal level or amount that basic income should be set at so that it is progressive and has a positive impact on all these things listed here, so people's ability to live in dignity and in health. Also, what policies we'd need to go alongside it. So it's not an either-or debate. You know, what else do we need to enshrine in terms of housing, health provision, education, to defend and actually improve upon? And then finally, if the trade unions were putting forward a basic income proposal, what would be our favoured way of funding it? So most of the stuff that journalists are putting in the media is just assuming that we have to just tweak income tax. But clearly there's many, many other ways it could be funded, new forms of tax or other revenue streams that don't currently exist. So I want to make sure that the unions are injecting that into the debate and we're not just going down, trapping ourselves into one sort of dead end there. So just to finish, these are some ways you can follow what's happening with unions in the UK and basic income. There is a Facebook group. Just to let you know, we tend to, you can read everything in there publicly, but we tend to want the group to be for actual UK trade unionists, so that it's useful and we can connect and communicate with each other, rather than having it just a general basic income group. There's a Twitter account as well. There's also some people within the Labour Party which is very closely tied with the trade unions, they've set up a basic income supporting account for within the Labour Party. And then just finally, you can also contact me directly on this email address. I would love to hear from you, hear what's going on where you work, and hear about what the unions are saying. And also, I'm very happy to get put in touch with Norwegian trade unionists who would like to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just get our different participants to come up and have a short little exchange of ideas on both union issues and other issues. And you just have to fight over the microphones here. There we go. So given that you come from Birmingham, I'm not quite sure if there are any strong links between Norway and Birmingham. The only one I can think of off the cuff like this is John Carew, Jon Carew. He used to play for Aston Villa a couple of seasons.
I don't know.
No, you don't know. This is part of culture, you see. Yes. Yes, he used to play for Aston Villa. Now, given the latest topic which we were presented for, the union issue, I'd like to ask our Finnish friend first. Given what Becca told us, were there any ideas that you would like to bring home with you to Finland concerning how to approach unions in order to make them more positive towards the idea of basic income, given that you said that the unions in Finland were fairly hostile?
Well, thank you for a very, very interesting presentation. I think the major issue is that the labor market context is really different. I mean, it was the telling slide showed that the number of zero-hour contract has increased tremendously over the last few years, and there is a real problem with in-work poverty. And that's not the case in Finland. I mean, those workers who have permanent job contracts, they are very well covered. So it's kind of an insider-outsider group. So when it comes to introducing basic incomes, I think the labor unions are not the first tier collaborators. So I would go for citizens groups, and I would go perhaps for those labor unions which include self-employed or forced self-employed members, freelancers, so forth.
Okay, good. Nana, I mean, given your experience and knowledge of Norwegian work life, what would you say? Wouldn't it be a strategic move in the right direction if one were to approach the unions in order to get them to understand more what basic income is about?
Yes, I agree with you. But I and many more than I have tried that. And it's, we meet a wall. I meet a wall, at least I can say. That's my experience. They talk about the very successful welfare state we have, like the Labour Party politicians too. So it's very difficult to get them to understand that there are very good arguments in favor of basic income.
Carlo?
So I think in this country and most countries, I think that unions, they are in favor of everything where they can have an influence themselves. And I think that is important, that to tie these things more together. Let me first say one thing, that there are very good arguments that unions would benefit from any form for guaranteed income, basic income. For example, it works like a already financed strike fund. You can tolerate the conflict much better. Female workers can say, you are the asshole, my boss, because they can tolerate the conflict. They can tolerate to go idle a little bit, so you can raise the voice. And unions, she mentioned industrial workers of the world. That was the most radical union movement in the U.S. And Norwegian unions were very inspired by industrial workers of the world in many ways, but they differ a little bit in the willingness to enter into labor contracts. But I think it is to focus more on the things that would empower the unions and to also increase the incentives to be unionized. All these things, because unions are losing ground in most parts of the world. So they have arguments, and there are many good arguments in favor of that basic income would lead to more unionization, to stronger unions. And I think these things are the very, very important thing. In Norway, there will be no basic income unless the unions are more in favor of it. I think they will change attitude, but I have one more argument, but I can take it later in the debate.
Okay, very good. I'd like your opinion also, Uwe. You work a lot with students and stuff like that. But what about the unions? I mean, in your opinion?
My experience from participating in NGOs and different political parties is that the members in these organizations are more positive than the leaders. So I think it's once more, It's a question of how to mobilize the bottom-up initiative so that the leaders see that the people in Norway and other countries are positive to basic income. I don't know why leaders are so afraid of change of every kind, but they are in a way.
Okay, but Becca, I mean, you told us 3 times you failed. 3 times. I mean, your struggle continues, but basically, why did you fail? Why didn't you get those people to understand your message?
It's kind of a technical thing because in our region, the West Midlands region where Birmingham is, there's a lot of people that support it now. Basic income was the top #1 prioritised motion for the West Midlands region. But what had failed to happen, and I'd been saying this for about a year, is that people in other regions needed to do the same as us, so that there was 3 or 4 regions that also agreed it was priority. As it is at Unison Conference, there's so many things that people care about. It's domestic violence, it's Palestine, it's, there's just a huge list. Or if you're from Liverpool, it's about the Sun newspaper. They absolutely hate the Sun newspaper, and this year all the Liverpool delegates were going, prioritise our motion about the Sun newspaper.
Because of what happened at Hillsborough football
Exactly,
ground.
yeah. So you're just jostling with all these other pet causes that other people have. What we're going to do differently now is we're going to go to the different self-organised committees of Unison. So there's Black Members Committee, there's Women's Committee, Young Members, Disabled Members, and all these groups cover the whole country. So we're going to find the West Midlands representatives who are part of those committees, and then we're going to try and see if each committee would have its own. Well, obviously we'll go talk to them, see what they think. If they like it, would they put in their own motion, giving their own reasons why they support it? So this is why it'd be good for women workers, this is why it's good for young workers, this is why it's good for disabled workers. And then if we can do that, it will be guaranteed that it will get heard next year, because they'll mash all those together into one big motion and it will be high on the agenda.
Jolly good, jolly good. Carlo?
So, I think one reason why unions are skeptical, and maybe also political parties are skeptical, that is there are so many arguments in favor of universal basic income, or universal basic share in my case. So that it is a reform proposal that assembles all the crazy people. Look at yourself here. All the crazy people in the world, they like this, including myself. And you know that it is also that the arguments in favor of universal basic income of one sort or another are not very often consistent. So that, for example, you have the right-wingers who favor universal basic income, or a negative income tax, as they call it, because they're going to get rid of something they don't like, that most other people like, for example, the welfare state. So therefore, it's very important to tie these things in, to say that it isn't the case. This is not going to replace the welfare state, or the guarantee of the welfare state, at least. But many unions, many political parties, they consider the right-wing argument if they like to have a negative attitude. And I think this is that there are so many people arguing inconsistently for the same reform that makes it very easy to oppose it. And I think that is part of the reason that there are some false supporters, actually. Mm-hmm. But I will also say that when we present our views on these things, we should also think about that they're going to be acceptable for other people. They have to understand that you don't have to take my very good friend to the far left here. So you don't have to have a new conception of economics to be in favor of universal basic share, for example. You can just be a reasonable person. Think through what are the consequences. But since this reform collects the support of all the crazy people in every country, then it is very easy to oppose it. Because we need more people with tie and jacket, and people who look like you, boxers, and decent people. I think I'm serious about this.
Decent
because
boxers,
this is a general perspective, I think, on social change that most of us like many changes, and if we tie them together, we get none of them.
Margunn, you spoke about women and why basic income might be a good idea from a gender perspective, but we all know that we have a cash payment directly into the family today called kontantstøtten, given to, you know, I don't remember now for how many years you might obtain that type of cash payment from the state, but the argument is that this hinders integration of our new country women, so to speak. Immigrants coming to Norway who speak poorly Norwegian, etc., etc., they don't want to send their children to the kindergarten and they stay on the margins of society. Wouldn't a basic income also provoke that type of withdrawal from the rest of society in a time when they need to be integrated?
First,
Just take the microphone also. So that'd be lovely.
first, just a quick remark about the
Sure.
crazy people. Without the crazy people, there would be no change. Crazy people change the world all the time. That was the case, for instance, for the women who fought for suffrage 100 years ago. They were ridiculed, they were ostracized, it had huge costs, and they were definitely seen as crazy. But now we have had the suffrage for 100 years, even if we don't have got the equal pay yet, but things have changed. Well, interesting that you raised this issue, because I mean, in the beginning, the argument against this cash for care arrangement was that this would lead women to retreat to the kitchen sink and stay there forever, and we would have a huge backlash into the housewife era. That didn't happen. Then a new argument comes up. And now it's a concern for minority women, that they use this, and this is wrong because they should rather be out in the labor market. You can never, you can never say that things like the basic income or this cash for care payment is low, and now it's only for 1 year. So I mean, I'm not very worried about if women of minority origin stay at home 1 more year with their child, and then the child enters to kindergarten when it's 2 years old. I mean, there is a big discussion about when should children enter kindergarten. Is it good for all children to enter kindergarten at once? Is this the only way of organizing life? I think...
So you're not afraid that women of immigrant stock would stay behind, stay out of the labor market if they got a basic income? Maybe
you cannot tell what will happen in the future. No. But I think this would also give women of minority origin more autonomy within the family, which is very important because, as I said before, a lot of women of minorities are controlled not only by their husbands, but also by their mothers and fathers-in-law, and have a very...
So you had to guarantee that they had their own bank account.
So but I mean, the basic income, it's an individual right, that would be very good for some of these women.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heikki?
Well, I'd like to comment this point since I've carried out some research on this topic. I did my PhD on family policy comparing Sweden and Finland. And this problem has been very much in the agenda in Finland. Of course, the context is a bit different since we have this kontantstøtte. It's called home care allowance, and it's extended until the youngest child turns 3. And we have, I think there is a consensus emerging among the scholars that it's really a bad system. It acts like a trap for women, especially for low-educated women. We don't have as many immigrants as you, but that population is also increasing. So it has a very bad consequences also in the life course. It leads to a lower pension rights, for example. And most of us in the academic world would like to get rid of this system. So it's a genuine problem, and I've tried to come around this in my head, what to do. Perhaps there should be a kind of a universal daycare fee so that those who are not using the daycare would need to pay for it. So I mean, it's a true problem, because you said that if you would have, let's say, you would have this basic income in Norway, it would not just incentivize them to stay to stay one more year at home, because they would extend this support as long as the kids live at home. So I think there are some difficult issues there.
Okay. Response to that, Margunn?
Well, I do not say that there might not be some problems, but and in Norway too, I think all academics agree that this cash for care benefit is a really bad thing. And I want to be the devil's advocate, because I think it's simple. And I mean, this is only one issue, and you have to look at the different effects of introducing such an income. And there might be some beneficial effects and others which might not be so positive.
Okay. Ove?
In my opinion, basic income is part of a bigger picture. The main challenges today is concerning environmental problems, is financial problems, is war, peace, is terrorism. It's a whole lot of different problems that could not be solved one by one. Therefore, we need a change in science from a disciplinary focus to a more, at least interdisciplinary or at best transdisciplinary perspective. That means that basic income is part of this big picture. And I think Johan Galtung has a very good expression when he differs between negative and positive peace. Negative peace is reducing the problems connected to war by using military or aggressive means. Positive peace is to eliminate the causes behind these conflicts. And the problem today is we have a kind of economy that causes a whole lot of problems all over. So we have to change something. And in this change process, I think basic income is of great importance. And it's part of this big change project. And we cannot change everything overnight. But in the universities, in the academic world, we can work for more transdisciplinary projects. We can work for introducing interdisciplinary work groups, dialogues. And this is a beginning. But today, everything is solved one by one of different departments in the government, in the local communities. There are different people working with different things, and no communication between these people. Okay. So integrate things and see basic income as part of a big change. That is what I think is necessary here.
Before leaving this issue, women who potentially might be left behind sort of on the side, Nana, do you have any thoughts of migrant, immigrant women who might be sort of left out of the labor market because they get a cash flow which supplies them with some type of safety net, if you like?
Not in addition to those two opinions, because they feel the picture. I think it's a little danger that they will be excluded or separated from the labor market.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay. Heikki, you had your hand up.
I just would like to agree with what my colleague said here. And I think you probably, some of you know this book, this Homo sapiens, which is written by this Israeli historian, Yuval Noah Harari. And I think he made a very interesting notion that basic income, universal basic income, it's not universal and it's not basic. It's not universal in the sense that it has been discussed mostly in the Western country context, and it's advocated by mostly Western country representatives. And if we take this automation argument, I really like the slides which you showed where it was vividly seen that the effects of automation and robotization mostly concern developing countries. So if we would like to solve this problem of how to deal with robots, we would need to put way more money into those poor countries, and that's why I also sympathize with Kalle's idea, which is more like bringing in this universal aspect into universal basic income. And the second issue is perhaps what you said, is that it's not a basic in a sense that it's just about money, and when people's basic needs, they also include safe place to live, security, it includes healthcare, it includes most importantly education. Basic income is just a matter of money, so we would need to think about this. If we really want to make a change, we should somehow widen our idea of basic income to cover other areas of human needs.
Yes, Kalle, that was a very interesting slide which Pekka showed us, that robotization basically would hit workers in the south more than in the north.
Yeah, so there's a discussion about that. So that if you go to mechanization in history, so that it came first where wages were high, not where wages were low. So I'm not quite sure.
But this was a World Bank source, wasn't it?
Yeah, so
that
doesn't make it more trustworthy, in my view. But I think there's some interesting aspects of these things. Clearly, where guaranteed basic income is needed the most is where the least discussed, and that is in poor countries. So that's really where welfare state arrangement of any sort is highly, highly, highly needed. And it's very important. I think the first time it'll be going to introduced on a large scale in a developing country, then I think it will be inspiration also for richer countries to do something similar. India is close. There's a heated debate. I've been talking several times in India about it. Last time in a conference in Delhi, together with Debaraj Ray and others. There's a huge interest. And you see that when the bureaucrats come and talk about it, then suddenly they become very interested in universal basic services, all kinds of things. But they're very afraid of universal basic income. In India, 1% of the population pay taxes. Of course, it's a crazy setup. The whole organization of India is just crazy. Entire agriculture sector is exempted from paying taxes. Rich landlords doesn't pay a single rupee in taxes. And the reason, so that has been since independence, they have been like that. And if you have some guarantee from that they have committed to a certain plan to pay a basic income to everybody, then of course they have to have a more decent tax system. Then you have to have a sensible tax system to finance these things. So then you can roll on reforms like that. Unions in most developing countries, as I guess all of you know, they are middle-class institutions. They are not like unions in the UK and here. So they are better off workers. None of the poor in a poor country are a member of a union. So the unions are it's a not so reliable ally in this context. They are good. South Africa, they played a very important role in getting rid of apartheid. But after 1994, unions, I think, have had a somewhat disappointing effect. They coordinate too little. They have very little of the European coordination or Nordic type of coordination. They are very not good enough to sort of take in as members those are below there. And that's here where the basic income can be important. And to get them on board on the basic income scheme, because then you can also mobilize much more poor people to be union members, and social organization, as I've said many times, are very important to have social change. Finally, I'm a tendency to speak too long, so it's going to be short on it. So I think I agree on most of the things that Ove said. But I don't need all this, I don't have to pack it in the same way. So that was my only argument in the first time. If you're going to get the unions are very conservative institutions. If you're going to have them on their side, they have to see that these are just sensible arguments. They don't have to buy a big package of new orientation of disciplinary work at the university and so on. I don't think Ove means this, but there is a tendency, so you have to just take him as an example. There's a tendency that we said if you are for basic income, then you're for a lot of other crazy things that they are conservatives against. I think you're very for interdisciplinary work, but it doesn't have to be in favor of that to be in favor of basic income.
Okay, Ove, you have to answer that.
But crazy things, that's very interesting, because maybe that is thinking outside the box, outside the establishment. And change depends on this contrast between what is actuality and potentiality, as Aristotle would say. If things are interconnected, then I think it's a very good idea to connect basic income to other things. As far as I know, this change process is not something that will happen in the future. It's already happening in many different countries. But Norway is not in the front because we have too much money and we can pay out every problem in a way. So far. I agree with the reasoning here, but I think it's necessary to change the idea about the economic man to maximize your own profits. That's a very fundamental thing in economics. And the other thing is the idea of atomistic competitive market. If we should change practice, we have to do something with the micro level and the macro level. It's not enough to say, business people, change practice. It's not possible.
Okay, very good. I don't want to stretch your patience. I'll open for 2 comments or questions from the audience, if you have any, before we leave it for the panel to summarize. Do I see one hand? Yes, the lady over there. Yes.
Hei, jeg heter Alexandra Larsen, jeg er student ved Universitetet i Oslo. Jeg har et spørsmål til Kalle Mone angående National Income Share. Man lurte på, dersom nasjonalinntekten faller, hva vil da skje med kjøpekraften, og der er også markedet? Altså, hva vil samfunnspåvirkningen være hvis nasjonalinntekten faller?
I can take it in English. Yeah. So if there's, this is in a sense, it's not very realistic in the Norwegian case, but say for a developing country it's very important that the obligations that you have towards your citizen, that you have some sort of insurance device between the local state of Kerala, for example. They will need some insurance. They commit to pay a certain amount, 10%. Well, if they're hit by a crisis, well, they share the consequences of the crisis also on the citizen. And it's very similar to, they also pay less taxes when there's a decline in the economic conditions. I would have liked, let me put one more argument and say that what a universal basic share does, it takes uncertain, fluctuating income at the local level, at each individual level, and put it into an average. That's the national product. And you give 10% of that out again. Say that you pay 10% in taxes and you get 10% of the national income per capita back again. That means that you get a much more certain income flow back from the government than you pay into the government. And of course, those who have high income, they pay a lot into the scheme and they get little back compared to what they pay in. Those who are poor, zero income, for example, pay nothing in and they get a lot back again. And there's insurance devices on this scheme on many different levels, including insurance for the government about fluctuations in the local economy.
Very good. There have been 2 hands up, and we'll close shop after that. So first the gentleman there, and then the man from the Green Party over there.
Thank you very much. My name is Per Wies, and I am the member of the Labour Party International Forum Central Board. So I have the tendency to become one of those crazy in your club if 2 questions of mine are answered. I have 2 problems with this project. The one is, you must have discussed it very thoroughly. I came a little late, and thanks to her, I came to know about this meeting. About the income, how to finance this. This must be a very precarious issue, how to finance. But my question mostly is about the psychological effect, social psychological effect of it in the society, where the motivation, they call it the locomotive of the human, working psychology is to make a better life, to struggle to get a good income. So don't you think that the law of lassitude, that means to become lazy, and even Albert Einstein said it in physics, the law of lassitude, don't you think that makes people more inclined to sit on the sofa and not to do nothing, and they say, okay, I have enough, and to embark into some other types of personal activities which is not income bringing? Thank you very much.
Becca, would you like to answer that one? The law of lassitude, that you just sit on the sofa and eat your chips and drink your Coke and stuff. What do you think?
Boxing.
Yeah, sure. We can only speak from the evidence we've gathered, but that's not what we've heard. As I mentioned in my presentation, people did have quite clear thoughts on what they might like to do, and they were active things, and they were positive things for society. It was having better quality time with family, giving back to the community, whether through volunteering, starting actually new projects that might not factor into the GDP but would improve all our lives quite measurably, and also getting more skills, so maybe stepping out of the labour market for a time to go back to education, go to education for the first time. Again, we're all going to benefit from that. Who knows how many skills and talents are kind of hidden and buried among us at this time in terms of things we could invent, problems we could sort out if it wasn't for the fact that someone is, stuck selling shampoo at Superdrug, when instead they could be, coming up with some sort of cure or environmental innovation. So I'm not concerned about that, and based on what people are telling us, it's not something that I think is a big fear. It sort of seems like a logical thing you might expect when you first hear of the idea, but from when we've had conversations, people are telling us that they think it is a reasonable thing, that it just represents a fairer sharing of what we should be entitled to, and a lot of people can see how it could be a platform for many positive things to flourish off the back of this one policy.
Jolly good. And then there's the gentleman over there.
Hei, Jørgen Øverås heter jeg. Jeg har egentlig 2 spørsmål. Det første er rettet til Bjørn Holt. Du snakker jo mye om kvinners autonomi, og hvordan borgerlønn kan bidra til det. Og du snakker om dette her med at det kan føre til større grad av selvbestemmelse, da, både i hjemmet, altså i den private sfæren og i offentligheten, siden en har et inntektsgrunnlag da, som går til individet. Men fortsatt så har du i arbeidsmarkedet det du snakker om, at du har store lønnsforskjeller, eller i hvert fall lønnsforskjeller, mellom kvinner og menn. Jeg bare lurte på om du hadde noen sånne syn eller perspektiver på hvordan en borgerlønn kan innføres sammen med andre ordninger, da, for å se til at graden av selvbestemmelse det fører til blir lik mellom kjønnene. For jeg ser jo på, i hvert fall jeg da, ser på autonomi som ikke nødvendigvis et spørsmål om at du har det eller ikke har det, men det finnes grader, og en kan også se på det i et likhetsperspektiv, da. Så det å se på likheten i autonomi mellom kjønnene tenker jeg jo at kan være viktig. Lurer på om du hadde noen perspektiver på det.
Morgan? Autonomy between the genders? Or you take it in Norwegian if you like.
Grunnen til at jeg spør, kan jeg jo si da, det er at dette konseptet med republikansk frihet, altså at ingen skal dominere noen andre, er veldig sentralt i den moralske debatten om borgerlønn. Så det er på en måte en grunn til at jeg spør.
I'm not quite sure if you ask about, what about the gender pay gap?
Ja, altså at du mener jo at borgerlønn kan føre til høyere autonomi for kvinner, men jeg tror også det er et likhetsaspekt av dette med autonomi da, at en må prøve å få til lik grad av autonomi for både kvinner og menn når en snakker om borgerlønn i et kjønnsperspektiv da. Tenker du deg noen andre ordninger som borgerlønn kunne kombineres med for å se at du får større grad av likhet på grunn av dette, altså med utgangspunkt i at du har lønnsforskjeller da, i arbeidsmarkedet, som borgerlønn mest sannsynlig ikke vil påvirke da?
Okay, Morgan, are you able to answer that fairly tricky question
very tricky.
in a short...
But of course, I mean, a basic universal income is just one piece. The gender pay gap, it's very tricky, it's very difficult, it's not moving, it's there, and it has to be addressed in various ways, along with other, I mean, there are still divisions, not only the gender differences, but also among people who have low wages, all genders. So I mean, you have to continue to work on trying to work with inequality in various ways. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last one is, the last question will be to the gentleman in the back. Short and sweet, please.
Ja, det var noen kommentarer da. Jeg skal være heller litt kjapp da. Det har vært undersøkelser om hva ville du gjort hvis du fikk borgerlønn. Og de fleste, veldig høy prosent, sa at jeg ville vært aktiv og jobbet mer og sånn. Men hva tror du hvis de andre fikk borgerlønn? Ja, de ville sove på sofaen. Så man tror det best om seg selv. Men jeg tenker også det er noen etiske spørsmål med borgerlønn som bør tenke seg om. For eksempel dette med befolkningsvekst. Hvis vi skal gi ubetinget basisinntekt til storfamilier, så vil det lønne seg av storfamilier. Så da har vi kanskje et lite problem. På den andre siden så kanskje reduserer familiestørrelsen når man får økonomisk trygghet, så jeg ser jo den nå. Og så den andre, så jeg tror det at vi må ta litt vekk den U-en litt, for jeg tror vi må ha noen betingelser. For eksempel, vi sier alle skal ha borgerlønn, og så sier Ove at ja, for da må vi kanskje gradere den, og jeg sier kanskje vi må tenke 18 år, og 18 år i landet, altså statsborgerskap. Du må bo i landet, slik at disse pengene går mer i et kretsløp i landet. Det tenker jeg mer på.
Okay, those were good comments, observations, interesting thoughts. Before closing, a last comment from all in the panel. Nanna, as an academic, what would you say is your job in this? What is your task in order to gain more insight into what a basic income could be? What do you foresee that your institution should? What type of role should you play?
My institution is not interested in this issue. So I'm the only one, so
That's the
so
same
I don't
for
think
all
I
of us.
get any help from them. And I will, of course, study the subject further on and listen to you and listen to all of us and go on like this, like
Okay,
I've done in 20 years. So,
Lovely. So you're still in the struggle, so to speak. Lovely. Okay.
I will be that for the rest of my life, I think. Yeah.
Margun,
The same.
yeah, that is short and sweet. That is short and sweet. Very good. Kalle, I mean, you're obviously in the forefront here on the global issues. Do you foresee that this idea of yours with this share, is it realistic within a 20-year perspective? Or is it just one of those ideas which we need to have in order to continue thinking, getting new ideas and so on and so forth?
I think it is. I think also that if you look back, there are a lot of things that you laugh of today that we were very much controversial, say 50 years ago, or 20 years ago even. And I think this is the perspective that many people will look back later on and say, why were they so slow? Why were they so skeptical? Why couldn't they just try it? And I think there are many, many more good experience that countries have that can come up as a support for arrangements like this than have been put up in the debate so far, but little time. We used to see one thing. Norway got oil rent. Oil rent could have been given out as tax deductions. It wasn't. It was given out as a sort of expansion of programs in the welfare state, basically. What happened in the same period? So that means that there were guaranteed of a certain minimum level of welfare for everybody. You should think that if the sofa problem was big, you should have a lower work participation as a consequence after oil. In Norway, we doubled almost work participation in the same period. In particular, female work participation came in a period where there were more welfare benefits for everybody. That's an enormous important lesson. The value of female work participation is of the equal value of the oil fund in Norway. And these things should much more be emphasized, that the people are not like that. They are much more collective, and they like working.
So, Becca, what would you bring back from this discussion in Norway to your work in Britain in order to give you more clout, more breakthrough power, if you like?
Okay. I wanted to quickly mention a couple of things which is related partly to your discussion on women from migrant communities, and then also what I'm going to do when I get back. So Birmingham in the West Midlands has a huge amount of migrant people that have newly arrived in the region and the city. And what we find is women from those communities very often are they've started a small business actually from home, so it may appear that they're in the home, but they are actually working and bringing in income. And so we actually think that is a great, that entrepreneurial group is very important to engage with and see what they think of the idea, because it could clearly benefit. If you're self-employed in some way, just as a sole trader, then this is something that could be much interest to you. So I wanted to make the point that often women from migrant communities are very entrepreneurial in our experience in Birmingham. Also very much clustered into the care industry. So my branch of Unison and Unison as a whole is female dominated, and many, many care workers, so paid care workers. I'm a part-time family carer, but I actually want to see basic income at a level that would enable people to, refuse to work as a carer if they didn't want to do that. I think that would be transformational. I want that as the relative of a disabled person, because at the moment the industry is set up that you could be left with no money unless you take a job in care. So you've got no choice about it, and that is just a recipe for disaster for the recipients of care. Does that make sense? So that is something as well, a huge, and it ties in with where are women from migrant communities working. You'll find them in care on the lowest possible pay. These are people who should be having a strong conversation with basic income about. So I guess my final words would be not to think of the unions as something separate, because all of you in this room, some of you will be union members yourself, or you'll have friends or family that are union members, and having the debate broaden out and more popularity rise up through the unions, definitely going to come from the bottom up, as other people have said. So go to speak to someone in a suit, you're probably not going to get much interest until that pressure comes from below. That's what we found.
Lovely.
In UK.
Heikki, at the end of the day, when you're going to sum up the Finnish experience and experiments, will it only be a parenthesis, or will it be important, do you think, in the struggle for a basic income?
Well, I would like to develop this idea of crazy people changing the world. To me, it seems that we don't have in social policy, in social sciences, we don't have people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. We have those people who are visionaries and who are innovators, and then we have people who are pragmatists. There are a lot of good ideas, a lot of crazy ideas, but only very few of them are actually implemented. And they are not implemented unless those people who are pragmatists are actually pushing through those policies. And the pragmatists, they have to seek the support not from the crazy people, but from the people, from the masses, so to say, from the voters, because this is a democratic process. And it seems that, well, I'm not that familiar with this basic income movement, but my feeling is that there is some sort of tension as we move forward with these proposals of basic income, and this idea is somehow getting a flesh, that there is this tension emerging between the pragmatists and the crazy people. And many of the crazy people will be really disappointed because the actual pragmatic ideas which are going to be supported by the voters, they are far away, and they don't look similar to those crazy ideas that they had in the first place.
Okay, Uwe, I see you've been noting as crazy. Would you like to share your notes with us as your end comments?
Yes. Kenneth Boulding, one of the most influential contributors to the establishment of ecological economics in 1989, said that how the society will be in the future is the focus in science today. We should also be focused upon how we will the society to be in the future. And I connect this to the old idea of actuality, potentiality in our Western tradition and yin-yang in the Eastern tradition. In every situation, you find the opposite. And I think what we call here crazy people are the potential. We have the actuality, there are all the normal people, and the potential is what we can call crazy people. Karl Mannheim, Paul Ricoeur, others, differed between ideology and utopia. Ideology is the normal people. All the political parties in Norway are discussing very seriously without any utopian thinking at all, I think, in my opinion. At this place, Litteraturhuset in Oslo, a very good place for discussing utopian ideas. Today it was basic income, another day it's another thing. Everything is interconnected. This place is very important. So my inspiration after participating here is always go out and motivate for establishing utopian processes, utopian workshops. And this functions. In Ås, the students in Ås reported back after I visited there, we have starting with utopian thinking. The same at other universities in Bergen. I was a guest at a big seminar there for the students. It's the students who invites for this kind of discussion, not the rector at these universities. And I agree with all others here, even in Bodø, we are very few people talking in this way, but they exist. There are someone here and there, and together we are a big minority. And this big minority have influence. We try to inspire thinking original thoughts and try them out in practice and see how it functions. Therefore, Finland is very important here. We have something going on in Scandinavia. Norway is not in the leading position here. We have to do something.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Give a big hand to this very good. And
So there's a lot of attention around basic income internationally, which helps us here in Norway also. And we try to participate as good as we can. Yeah, I also want to, yes, of course, I want to say thank you, all lecturers and speakers today, and Andrew. We want to give you a book as a gift, because we recently learned that Rutger Bregman's book, Utopia for Realists, is now published in Norwegian. It's for sale here in literature houses, and we would like to give that for you as a gift. And we also have received from Spartacus a video greeting, is that correct to say it in English? Video greeting from Rutger Bregman, because he is coming to Oslo now, September 21st, where he will attend to an open meeting in Kulturhuset in Oslo, September 21st. Yeah. It is Agenda magazine who is inviting, and that is also interesting. That is social democratic. They are, you know, so there is. After that, he will go to the Kapittel Festival in Stavanger. And also NRK is interested. Our spokesperson, Øyvind Stensen, where are you? There he is, yeah. He will be interviewed on NRK P1, 28, also Monday morning. 28, that is Monday morning. Yeah. So that is very good that there's more and more interest, yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted here. Yeah. So. We have a special.